Today we've had possibly one of the stinkiest autumn statements that I've definitely that I've seen. I mean, we joke on the Discord with ISA Investor that when Osborne used to do a statement, you used to sort of come out of it with a few sort of dings here and there, and you maybe were missing an arm or some fingers or something. But this one seems to be well, a lot worse. I've got the rundown for you guys here. Paul, I don't know if you'll have heard it, so this might be news to you. So just a quick summary of the top line. The OBR, Office for Budget Responsibility, they're forecasting inflation is going to be 9.1% by the end of 2022, and it's going to be 7.5% by 2023. Unemployment is at 3.6% today. They think that's going to raise to just under 4.9% in 2024. So here's where we got stung. Tax, top rate of tax is going to be lowered from 150,000 to 125,140. All personal tax thresholds are now going to be frozen until 2028. So that's actually a real terms tax cut. If inflation's at 10% and your tax thresholds are not going up 10%, then that means that you're going to essentially get taxed more. Dividend allowance
shout out to who was it in the group in the Discord today who was running a little exercise on how much we might be behind. I know it wasn't completely accurate, but it was a pretty good exercise to do to show how. Who was it?
So shout out in that case, I'll pick up from here then. Shout out to Stubads, who was taking the personal allowance now and basically working that down for inflation, along with the kind of threshold at which you start paying basic tax and then I think higher level tax, and there was some other stuff in his spreadsheet as well that I haven't yet kind of got round to looking at. I was trying to work out what was going on there. Obviously, he's kind of estimating a little bit there with where inflation will be in the next sort of 5 years or so, but that gives you a feel for what you'll be able to kind of keep in real terms, I guess, if they stay fixed for as long as they're planning to. Which they may not.
Yeah,
you might get a change of government.
It was just really good to point out that it was a tax. It is a tax hike if you stay around till 2028. It's quite interesting way of looking at things.
Okay, so dividend allowance has been cut from £2,000 to £1,000 in April next year, and April the following year it's going to be cut again to £500, so it's getting quartered. Capital gains tax is following suit, going from £12,300 to £6,000 and down to £3,000 in 2024. Electric vehicles are no longer exempt from zero-rated VED, so that means you'll start paying tax on your electric vehicles. And stamp duty cuts announced in the mini-budget are going to remain until March 2025. So they offered the following on the cost of living support. Energy price cap is going to remain £2,500 until April, then a new cap of £3,000 until March 2024. Additional payments of £900 will be paid to those on means-tested benefits, £300 to pensioner households and £150 to those on disability benefits. Social rent increases are going to be capped at 7% rather than the 10.1% that they were going to increase by. National minimum wage increased to £10.42 from April 2023. Benefits to increase by inflation 10.1%, as is pension credit, and the triple lock is to remain. Just for those who don't know, triple lock is basically the state pension has a triple lock rule, which means that the state pension must rise each year in line with the highest of these three possible figures. So it'll be inflation, average earnings, or 2.5%. So obviously with inflation being at 10.1%, they're in for a hefty raise. Anything in there jumping out at you guys before I move on to business tax?
You want to talk about dividends and talk about dividend cuts? That probably affects some of us more than others. Obviously, most of dividends from stocks. I think this is what got very confusing in the Discord earlier. By the way, it's the Discord that we're all part of, and we all have a big old chat. There's about 1,000 people in there. We're all chatting about different things within there. We're a really good community, but I think people got very confused when we were saying, we're going to get stung on dividend tax now. They thought it was mainly from the stocks, and no, I think most of us have our stocks in a tax safe ISA, so we don't actually get charged any tax this side on our dividends. But I think me in particular, I've now switched myself to a self-employed basis, and that allows me to take dividends out of my limited liability company, and that has so far been a very helpful tax way of getting around paying a little bit more tax. And most people do this, and I think the government has known this for a long time. I think Steve gets quite a nice dividend as well. It's probably not going to make too much of a difference to you, but I'm certainly going to change the structure of my company now to maybe still take it, because the dividend tax isn't that high. It's about 8.75% if you're on the basic rate, which I am. And so it still will be tax efficient for me to take out dividends out of a company for myself. But yeah, in general, it's not going to affect anyone with their stocks. But maybe if you're a self-employed person, it could affect you a lot more tax-wise.
Yeah, just to quickly explain how that works for people. So the first £2,000 of your dividend was completely free of tax, and then if you got more of that, it then basically gets tacked onto your income. So say, for instance, you use up 35,000 of your allowance in salary, you get your first 2,000 free, you get a 15,000 dividend. That's essentially like adding 13,000 on top of your salary, so it would then be taxed at 8.75 until you hit the next band, and then it would move to a different taxable rate. So that basically, that 2,000 is being reduced to 1,000 and then to 500. It's long been a way for people to get around paying national insurance and things like that for quite a long period of time. So that's a fair thing to swap. Unfortunately, that's going to hurt me a lot. But Steve, do you have anything, or do you want me to shuffle on?
You were lumping the NHS under business tax stuff? Or...
there's loads more coming.
Okay, mate, I'll let you carry on then in that case. I sort of had more holistic views on this stuff rather than individual bits.
Okay, so business tax VAT threshold is frozen until March 2026. They're going to implement reforms on taxes to big tech companies, although they've been saying this for 12 years and I've yet to see it. Windfall taxes. Energy industry is going to be hit with an expanded windfall tax of 35% up from 25% from the 1st of January until March 2028. Also a temporary 45% levy on electricity generators. So there was a bit of spending announcement as well to go with these new tax rises. So
how do you guys feel about windfall tax? What do you feel about it?
If we're pausing on this one, for me, they were the straw that broke the camel's back for me with Boris Johnson, because he did many things that many people found objectionable. But to my mind, the kind of windfall tax was something that he didn't even think was a good idea. Was only interested in it because he thought it would be a vote winner, and I didn't actually think it was that clever. I'm still not convinced I think it's that clever, but I think there's an awful lot of noise around this. So as I understand it, Shell are currently forecast to pay nothing in windfall tax this year, because all of the stuff that would be taxable for them is offset by North Sea oil investments, which they can use against this. So increasing it from 25% to 35%, I fail to see how that makes a difference to a number that's currently zero. The boss of Shell, as I understand it, was sounding off, saying that he really felt that Shell ought to be paying a windfall tax, which it made me kind of vaguely cross on this, because if you really think, if you're any business, whether you're Shell or anybody else, and you think you ought to be paying tax, there is a facility for you to just send that to the Treasury. There is a place you can send any tax that you're supposed to send to. You don't have to wait until they come and take it off you. So I had no real time for that particular line. Steve?
Well, I was just going to say, he's there for you, remember? So as a shareholder of Shell, he's there to represent you. So if he started voluntarily sending off tax to the Treasury, the likelihood is that he would lose his job. I think what he meant is, look, I'm happy to pay tax. Give me the implement the way for me to need to pay the tax, and I will pay the tax, but I won't voluntarily give you it because I'm here to represent the shareholders, and I quite like getting paid all of this money to sit here. So yeah, he was never going to voluntarily pay the tax, but I do agree with him. He's asking to pay the tax. Just implement a way for him to pay the tax.
Do you think it's a bit of a PR, though? I thought it was a bit of a PR sort of way. He knows he doesn't have to pay the tax, and a lot of the general public who probably don't understand the situation very well think evil oil companies should be paying more tax because they're making so much money off the pump, right? And obviously it's a bit more delicate than that, isn't it? Because through the pandemic, they lost a lot of money. The shareholders of Shell lost a lot of money. So it is a bit more delicate than that. And depending on whether you enjoy being a shareholder or if you're a member of the public who's getting screwed at the gas pump, I think it is a bit more delicate. But he knows he doesn't have to pay tax. So to save face with the public and not be the evil Shell, he goes, yeah, we should be paying the windfall tax, knowing full well he's not going to pay any tax this year.
Yeah, but
anyway.
it's 100% blame passing, but at the end of the day, the fault of not paying tax on this is firmly at the Conservatives' door. He's going to pay the tax. If you implement the system to make him pay the tax, he'll pay it. You don't implement it, he won't pay it. They didn't implement it, so he ain't going to pay it.
Yeah. I don't mind a system that kind of allows you to offset your tax by making investments in the UK, especially if, look, this is nebulously supposed to be a kind of growth statement. I'm not going to kind of foreshadow Steve's stuff too much, but I really didn't see much of that. I don't mind the idea that a way of encouraging people to invest in growth projects is to tax them if they don't, or something like that, especially if it's a big oil company or something along those lines. One of the things I've become slightly wary of with these things is partly Paul's thought of when you're in trouble, we're not going to help you, but if you do well, we'll have the excess, thanks. You're not allowed to do well in this situation. I worry about the message that sends from the UK, because, okay, it's all fine when it's oil companies, because no one likes oil companies, right? But I do worry about what that will mean for other businesses when they fall out of fashion or out of favour and so on. And they tend to think to themselves, okay, look, directly you don't like us, you're going to start randomly windfall taxing us as well, are you, in that case? Maybe I won't bring my business to the UK in that case, if that's what's likely to happen.
Yeah, very, very interesting point, that is.
It's key to remember Shell's not in anyone's good books anyway, because they've got rid of the Royal Dutch bit. They've got rid of the bit where they were also registered in Holland, and the reason they got rid of that is, and they will never tell you this, is because they didn't like paying the Dutch withholding tax on all the dividends they were releasing at the time. So they're not in anyone's good books at the moment, I wouldn't imagine. But I will swiftly move on, because I realise we're 14 minutes in. Spending, NHS budget is protected and increased by 3.3% in each of the next 2 years. Now, this again is a nice thing, but it's actually a real terms cut, because the NHS budget is over 100%, inflation's at over 10.1%, so you would need at least 10 billion to not make it a real terms cut, but never mind. In 2023 and 2024, the government will invest an extra 2.2 billion in schools. Government will proceed with a new nuclear power plant at Sizewell C. I think this one will be pretty much universally nodded as a good idea from all of us. No cuts on any capital budgets. Rail projects going ahead. Northern Powerhouse Rail, HS2, East West Rail, all going ahead. East West Rail, I think, are just going to get a diesel train out of this, but never mind. Overseas aid budget to remain at 0.5% instead of the 0.7% that we're aiming for. But that's not a massive issue, I don't think. So a few things that they forgot to mention. They're still not adding VAT onto school fees, despite discovering that would raise 1.6 billion in tax, which is an interesting one. The 23% increase in fuel duty is still going ahead in 2023. Don't know why they didn't mention that one. They're disbanding the COVID fraud recovery team with £4.7 billion still outstanding to be collected. No changes to non-dom tax status. Rachel Reeves said that was probably the only one that Rishi wouldn't sign off. Cap on bankers' bonuses is still being removed. Business tax is obviously going up from 19% to 25%. So I think that was quite an interesting statement. I mean, I feel like I've come away with it with a few legs and an arm missing. How about you guys?
I think I've mostly come away from it confused, to be honest with you. Steve, the way I tend to think about these things is trying to think, well, what do I think this thing is supposed to be doing, and how likely do I think it is to achieve that? And obviously there's two purposes to any budget or statement or anything. And one of those purposes is always get this party elected, basically, at the next election, or try and prepare to get this party elected at the next election. But I'm not particularly interested in that. But the question is, what do I think it's supposed to be doing for kind of me as a citizen of the UK, as an investor, as someone who kind of makes and keeps their money here? And I think I'm struggling to see how it's going to do the things that it says it is. So the goals were stability, public services, and growth. And of those, I think I'm struggling to get past more than about 1 out of 3 at best. So growth, I think this is going to be a real struggle. This looks to me like it's going to be something that doesn't particularly go for growth. I'm not saying it should have been something that went for growth. The mini budget thing was supposed to be a growth thing. Nobody liked that. So maybe we're not all about going all out for growth here. Maybe stability is more important. But I think stability is kind of still to be seen. So question mark on stability, cross on growth. Public services, maybe. I'm not sure about that. There were a few things there that seemed sort of vaguely encouraging to me, but not a tremendous amount. So My sense is that bringing down one tax threshold and leaving another one where it is, the headline I saw from that was kind of the first thing you mentioned, and the big headline thing that everyone's always interested in autumn statements and so on, was millions to pay more tax, presumably millions to get pay rises, because that's what would cause them to pay more tax unless they're getting suckered into a higher rates bracket. And if you're getting suckered into a higher rate bracket at 125,000 rather than 150,000, I don't really mind that for you, to be honest. Yeah, deal with it like that. But I wasn't as concerned about the kind of millions to pay more in tax thing. I'm a bit more worried about people's energy bills, though, and caps coming off those. Jeremy Hunt made a point about UK needing to achieve energy independence here, whilst also doing his very best to drive away the kind of oil companies that might be useful for that in the short term. So I sort of worry about the energy situation there. I worry about energy prices going higher, and I worry about the government having to do something about it. Overall, I thought this was a budget that I'm not sure what it achieves practically, other than maybe getting some people off the backs of the Conservatives at the moment who are reeling.
Yeah, I think so. I think to a point, this is an attempt to drive down inflation a little bit as well. With the high, I think there's a third. No, I think there's. I know you're gonna go. What is he talking about? I think there's possibly here a third possible way of controlling interest rates, not just by raising rates and not just by curbing government bond buying, but also why not stop people from having money? In a sense, over the next few years, maybe we can slow down people's spending because they are very scared of having no money, basically. So they're going to slow down their spending in general. But what I was concerned about, is echoing the same thing, is they did turn to trying to get into this energy drive system and get themselves, try to get England and the UK as more energy independent. And the main way we're going to do that is through renewables. And we're clearly, in some of the places here, electric cars and vans and motorcycles pay tax now. We're sort of discouraging that. We're discouraging that sort of green approach at the moment, which is probably where the likely place where in the future we're going to develop our energy independence. But obviously, and the same way, you said it already, I think, that we're pissing off the oil companies at the same time.
Well, if you want to bring inflation down, you want a good way of stopping inflation ever running as rampant as it has. Creating your own energy is a fantastic way of doing it and being in control of your own prices. Removing yourself from the international market so you're not at the whims of, Russia deciding to attack Ukraine or America deciding to hang on to billions of barrels of oil or even OPEC choosing to not bother making anything this week because oil's not at $100 a barrel. If you want to get away from all of that, the way to do it is to encourage green energy investment in the UK, and they say they're trying to do that, but there's no more onshore wind farms. They don't like onshore wind farms. There's no onshore solar farms that have been approved under this recent Tory government as well. So there's all of those problems. The other thing is that the UK tax burden now is at 36.3% of GDP. That's the highest it's been since the Second World War. So, we're essentially on a wartime budget here for not war economy. Do you know what I mean? We're not at war. Yeah. So I think this will be very difficult for people to bear. I think this is probably the final nail in the coffin for the Tory party. If they win the next election, I will be very surprised. Something has got to go catastrophically wrong for Labour here to lose this. And they're very capable of doing that. Let me just point that out. They're very capable of absolutely messing this up. But irony for me, I've got a little bit for you, Paul. 3 months ago, Tory MPs were cheering an essential 50 billion tax cuts package. And today they were cheering a 60 billion, essential again, package of tax rises and spending cuts. Are they the biggest hypocrites in the world?
It's mad, isn't it? It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Just it's like it's cheerleader mentality, isn't it? Or what's the Garmlick effect, which is the effect that if you get enough girls screaming for a male pop star, everybody would just start buying their records, basically. And this is similar Garmlick effect. All you're doing is you're releasing any old policy that sorts you out at the same time. And if you can have enough people clapping, I've got an image up here of Rishi Sunak and everyone tapping Jeremy Hunt on the shoulders and stuff. And I'm going, that's what's been released out there. That's the picture that they've released. Everyone is happy. We're trying to give this image of everyone being happy about the budget. And if you can do that and you can get enough, you're trying to get the other Conservatives on board at this point to generate a unified party. If you've got loads and loads of people like clapping Jeremy Hunt, you're going to get a few more people towing the line, and I'm pretty sure it's called the Garmick effect, and that's what you're seeing. It doesn't matter what the policy is; just get as many people clapping it as you can, and you'll get more followers.
Bo Burnham has a very good version, a very good song of that effect called "Repeat Stuff." If somebody's bored, that's well worth checking out.
I'll have a look at that. I think I got it from South Park or The Simpsons.